Welcome to the Parenting with Confidence podcast. I am your host, Teresa Alexander Inman, board certified behavior analyst and infant toddler developmental specialist. Today, I am honored to welcome Dr. Danny Brassell, who's America's leading, and okay, you heard that right, leading reading ambassador. Um, Dr. Brassell is a former inner city teacher. His mission is to bring the joy back in education and the workplace by transforming struggling and reluctant readers into more passionate and proficient readers. He shows audiences how to make reading a lifelong habit and trains leaders how to communicate their message through effective and inspirational storytelling. Welcome, 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 Dr. Brassell.
Thanks so much for having me, Teresa. And your audience, hopefully they understand that you're a stud if you're nationally board certified. You had to go through a lot of hoops to get that certification. So thanks for all that you do.
Uh, Thank you. And, I love it. My husband tells me, you work so hard. I said, no, I play with children and I teach families. And it's my passion. I really enjoy it. So thank you. Yeah, I've never been called a stud before, so thanks. I receive it.
Well, I've been making this point a lot recently, Teresa, because my brother's in the Air Force, my sister's a federal agent, and I've had more weapons pointed at me than the two of them combined as a teacher. And everybody loves to salute the troops for their heroism, but there are heroes in classrooms every day, and especially these teachers that for the last couple of years had to make the pivot on how to engage their students while on Zoom rather than in person. I mean, and we're losing way too many teachers. And really one of my passions is reminding people, this is why we do what we do. And the whole community has to understand that teachers have been through a lot and we need to really give them our kudos. So thanks for all you do. Thank you for your service.
Absolutely. And thank you for your service. And, you just reminded me of a story. A friend of mine who is a teacher went to breakfast with her brother who is in the military and had on his uniform. And the waitress came to him and said, thank you for your service and we'll be taking care of your breakfast. And she said, well, I'm a teacher.
It's true.
Because teachers have it a lot more, like it's more challenging because here you're trying to shape a young man who may not want to be shaped. And you have to work to motivate them. And, I always tell people besides parenting, teaching is the hardest job. Sadly, it's the most thankless job there is.
Oh. Yeah. And I mean, again, not to put down the troops or anything, but I was making this point the other day. We lost 13 troops in Afghanistan in 2021. We lost 19 children and 2 teachers at Uvalde Elementary. So if we're going to talk about war zones, let's really start having a discussion about the safety of schools and students and teachers. And I mean, at least a person that's signing up for the military, they sign up knowing that they might be seeing some kind of battle. You and I became educators because we want to play with kids and build up their curiosity. And it's all this other nonsense that is piled on. And I really, that story breaks my heart because it's the truth. We need to do a lot more for teachers. Yeah, really. And this is just the big thing is we just have to be a lot kinder as a society. People have gotten crazy. And if our leaders aren't going to model better behavior, then it's even more important for our teachers to be modeling that. So we don't wreck the next generation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so vital. People don't realize the burden that teachers have because they're always on, they're always being scrutinized by the students by oh miss, you just did this. It's like, wait, you thought you did that real covertly, whether it was wipe your nose or do something. And they pick up on everything, so you have to always be present in the classroom. Yeah. I don't think there's any other job that requires that, all the time.
Yeah.
So.
No, and that's what I always tell people. I'm like, we need to learn how to laugh at ourselves because you ain't all that, neither am I. And if you think you're all that, teach kindergarten for 1 week. Those little ones will set you straight. I mean, I was teaching one day and one of my little girls, LaShonda, she raises her hand. I'm like, LaShonda, question. She's like, Ms. Brassell, when are you going to trim your nose hair? And I'm like, this afternoon. Thanks for bringing that to my attention, LaShonda. I ain't all that.
They will definitely bring us back down. Yeah. And you have to be able to laugh about it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just makes an already stressful situation even more so if we take it personally. Because I tell teachers and parents, stop taking children's behaviors personally.
Yeah.
They didn't say that to make you, because they want to embarrass you. They said it because that's what they thought at the time. And we talk about freedom of speech, but we don't when it comes to children. We don't allow them to speak freely. And I think that we do them a disservice in that area.
Holy cow, Teresa, you have my vote for Secretary of Education. Absolutely. I mean, I used to tell my little ones, I'm like, if you're not making 25 mistakes a day, why are you here? This is why it's school. You and I already know how to do it. It's the getting to know how to do it that's the trick. And this is what kids are learning, is how to do it. And amen to everything you just said. That's wonderful.
Thank you. Now I'm going to give you a case study and I need your help here. Okay. So a student, male in 5th grade, and I hate to say, well, the school is on the other side of town because, people tend to judge people who do. Now, funny enough, that school has had fewer issues than other schools in other areas, but of course, we always highlight schools in certain areas. So I don't even know why I just said that, but I'll just continue. So here is, we'll call him Andre. So here's Andre in grade 5. And teacher asks Andre to read. And Andre flips his desk. And teacher insists on, well, come on, you know this. And Andre walks out of the classroom. As a teacher in that classroom, what would you glean from that situation?
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for the case study. Now I'm on, this is like a quiz now. It's like my interview. Well, poor Andre, this is something I have a major problem with in schools, is when we put kids on the spot without knowing if they can succeed. And we do this all the time. You see this with popcorn reading, which I always thought was the most useless activity. It's just stressing out kids, okay? Or you're trying to figure out which paragraph am I gonna have to read or whatever. But that teacher, and I'm not gonna blame the teacher because it might be a beginning teacher, doesn't understand, but he or she put Andre on the spot in front of his peers, and that's why he acted up. Now, the way to remedy that is in the future, before you ever ask Andre to read aloud in front of the class, I want you doing some one-on-one with Andre and make sure that he can read that passage with confidence. I mean, that's really all of your discipline problems in school, or basically kids aren't confident at something. I always love people when they talk about change, I'm like, people don't like change. People like routines, and children definitely like routines. For people to say, oh, I don't care about routines, I'm like, okay, then take a different route home when you're driving home from work. It'll drive you crazy. You already have something set in your mind. And so when you break that routine, it really screws things up. And I mean, I just think that really the way you build kids' passion for reading is by giving them lots of situations that you're building up their confidence. I'm a coach as well as a teacher, and it drives me nuts when I see coaches put a freshman in an important part in a game. I'm like, that's not what you do. You put the freshman in when you're already up by 3 touchdowns and there's nothing that they can do to screw it up. You build up their confidence. I'm a huge sports fan. Michelle Wie, I always loved as a golfer, but I thought her coaches at the beginning were crazy because she was so good, they decided to have her compete against the men on the PGA Tour. And what happened? She lost. And by the time she joined the women's tour, her confidence was shot, and it took her a while to regain that confidence, where I'm like, if I was coaching her, I would have put her on the women's tour, had her dominate like Annika Sorenstam, got her in a winner's mindset. So that way, when she joins the men's tour, she has that winner's mindset. I always tell this to my kids, you need somebody else to believe in you before you believe in yourself. I believe in all of you. They only give me the best and the brightest. Now let's go out and move the world. You got to get those kids believing. So, I mean, that's a long answer to a short case study, but poor Andre, Andre didn't deserve that. And again, I love you giving a case scenario like that. I wish beginning teachers were given those kinds of case studies. Like, well, what do we do? And how do we remedy that situation? Because Andre didn't deserve that. And the poor teacher now is going to be defensive because he or she thinks that they totally screwed up, or now they're labeling Andre a discipline problem. I don't think he's a discipline problem. I think Andre just wasn't confident in the situation and didn't want to be embarrassed in front of his peers.
Absolutely. And teachers, you don't know what you don't know. Teachers don't get enough training,
Not at all.
and that is a tragedy
Yeah.
for them. So they go in, they get put into a classroom. They have no idea about anything. They don't know the students. They don't know the students' history, which is really important to know. They also tell them, get to know your students. Do something we call like the 10 by 2. So for like 10 days, just talk to the child for 2 minutes about something, that just anything. Don't place a demand on them. Just talk to them, get to know them. Then they'll trust you and feel that you care, and you'll be able to teach them better. So,
Man, Teresa, you're making me feel like Forrest Gump. You're my Jenny. We're like two peas in a pod. I agree with everything that you're saying. I just love that. And again, teachers don't receive sufficient training. We throw them in, and the types of training teachers go through. I mean, now they're spending more time training teachers on how do you deal with a gunman on campus. I'm like, that's crazy. We need to be focused on, yeah. And actually, so this is one of the things I love. We do research. Nobody actually pays attention to the research. So I've been fed up with these school shootings. And so I started doing research on this. And the RAND Corporation actually did a 400-page study on school shootings. And I thought this was fascinating. So they showed the number one cause of school shootings is a person that's not right in the head. The number two cause of school shootings is if a school has a security guard. That increases the likelihood of a school shooting by like 5,000%. Wow. And I'm like, why isn't anybody looking at that statistic?
5,000%.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I was like, oh my, because a lot of kids, a lot of teenagers, they're going through a tough time. And bullying doesn't help anybody either. But when they see the security guard, a lot of them are now thinking death by security guard. They want to commit suicide, but they don't want to, so they do an act so it's somebody else. It was crazy. And I'm like, man, teachers deserve a lot better than that. We need to be right now, all I'm doing, when I go around, I've spoken in the last 2 weeks, I've spoken in 6 states, and I'm seeing the same thing everywhere. Huge teacher shortages. I mean, Omaha, Nebraska, I spoke to 64 teachers, 48 of them are quitting. I was in North Texas in January, and 9 superintendents on the same day resigned. I was like, oh my gosh, people have no idea the vacancies happening. I was just in a major school district. They have 1,200 openings right now for teachers, which means chaos. And so I'm not really teaching anything that people don't know. I'm really reminding people what a lot of us forgot, which is, hey, we need to start laughing and smiling and, getting to know your kid. I'll give you a story, Teresa. I always taught in the hood in South Central Los Angeles in the Compton and Watts area. And so I was blessed. My first elementary school, I was the only man at my school. I was the only white person at my school. I taught with predominantly elderly African-American women from the South who all had been teaching for at least 20 years. Well, my mentor was Mrs. Turner. Mrs. Turner had been teaching for 40 years. Mrs. Turner was from Alabama. She believed in 2 things, discipline and the Bible. When her little ones got out of line, she started reading aloud Revelations to them. And it was Mrs. Turner, this beautiful saint of a human being, who took me under her wing, and she taught me systems on how to bring joy back into my classroom. But addressing something you had said earlier, about 2 days before the end of my first year teaching in elementary, she's like, have you done your cumes yet? I'm like, cumes? What's a cume? And she's like, your cumulative folders. Have you filled out your cumulative folders? I'm like, what is a cumulative folder? I've never even heard of this thing. And so she takes me to the office, and there's these cumulative files on my students. And Teresa, the point of the story is, thank God I had never looked at a cum file, because some of my best students, when I'm looking at this, their past teachers and counselors are like, oh, this student is dangerous and doesn't know. And I'm like, holy cow, I would have had all these preconceptions And I didn't ever have those conceptions. I always looked, Somerset mom once said, if you refuse to accept anything but the best, you very often get it. I mean,
Yes.
and that's what I tell teachers. I'm like, if you get the low kids this year, use your child psychology, for crying out loud. On the first day of school, look at your class and say, you all have to help me out this year. This is my first time teaching in the gifted and talented program.
Mhm.
They start looking around, because there's this great book. A lot of people think it's good. I think it's great. It
Mhm.
says you should try and treat other people the way you want to be treated.
Right.
I find when I treat my students like they're geniuses,
Mhm.
they start acting like they're geniuses. And
Yeah.
so this is the kind of thing I need all of us as educators to really get in this mindset. Parents too. The one thing I was hoping was going to happen because of the pandemic was, since millions of parents were forced to involuntarily homeschool their kids,
Right.
I was hoping teacher salaries would raise. I'm like, you a tough enough job teaching your own kid. Now think of 33 kids from totally different homes in one classroom and trying to meet the needs of all those students. This is what a teacher does every single day. So again, it's kudos to the teachers listening to your show, Teresa.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, they are amazing.
Mhm.
Excuse me. So I want to go back to something that you said, because there was a study and it bore out, which was amazing, where teachers were told, you were given, because you're such an amazing teacher, you were given a group of gifted students. These students were not necessarily gifted. But at the end of the school year, they outperformed many other students who were actually gifted, because they thought, because it's mindset, they thought they were. And I want to also speak to parents with this, because when a child comes home with something, with a grade, and like, oh, you got this, it's like, I like the power of yet. You haven't mastered it yet. Instead of beating them down, you got a D, you got a this, you could have done better. And I've heard it so often in meetings with parents where they just beat their children down. And and these are, I have schools all over the county. So, and I hear it in all the schools. It doesn't matter what neighborhood the school's in, you hear the same thing. And it's just really sad that I really want to find a way to help parents, because they are their first child, they're the child's first teacher. So, is there something that you can share with parents
Yeah.
to help their children build that foundation, so that when they get to school, they're coming from a place of empowerment?
Yeah, there's a lot of great things that you're saying there, Teresa. First of all, we know expectations are everything. Again, I'm a coach, and I always tell players, I'm like, there's a reason Alabama always wins the close games in football, because they think they're supposed to.
Right.
Same thing happens with losing teams. They always lose the close game because they think they're supposed to. It's
Mhm.
all about what is your mindset, all there. So I created the world's top reading engagement program online. And the whole point was because I think schools do an adequate job of teaching kids how to read. But the question I always ask people is, what good is it teaching a kid how to read if they never want to read? I teach kids why to read, because I've never had to tell a kid, go watch TV. I've
Mhm.
never had to tell a kid, go play a video game. And I never want to have to tell a kid, go read a book. I want them to choose to do it on their own because they like it. Unfortunately, school teaches the misery of reading, and we're forcing kids like Andre, to read these things that they're not interested in, and I always challenge schools. I'm like, but what's your objective? If we're going to be into objectives, actually, what is your objective? Is your objective to get the kid to read better, or is it that they're familiar with classical literature? Because, so when I was teaching eighth graders in the hood, all eighth grade boys, they were not supposed to be special education. They just gave them to me because nobody else wanted to teach them. And I'm supposed to teach them Hamlet by Shakespeare. Now, they ain't interested in Hamlet. And so fortunately, I was blessed. I taught in an area, there's a great author from South Central LA called Walter Mosley. And he has a great book called Always Outnumbered, Always Outgunned. And so I read that with the fellas. And so then I'm like, well, wait a sec. You see how these gangs, how they're speaking in a different type of language? That's all Shakespeare. These cats are all, they're speaking their own type of language. And then all of a sudden the guy's like, oh, so these are like, and I'm like, yeah, you see this. And now there's a connection. So the kids are making the connection. I'm going off on a tangent there. Let's get back to the parents. So there's two numbers I want parents to focus on that are listening right now. Those numbers are 67 and 20. So a lot of people will tell you it takes 21 days to change a habit. And to those people, I say, show me the research on that. It's completely a fabricated number. I know exactly where the number comes from, by the way. It's from a wonderful book written in 1960 by Dr. Maxwell Maltz called Psycho-Cybernetics. Highly encourage everybody to read this book. But in the preface of the book, Dr. Maltz is a plastic surgeon, and he noted in the preface that most of his patients, it took them about 21 days to get used to their new faces. Well, a lot of self-help gurus, personal development masters, a lot of people I respect, by the way, they started telling people it takes 21 days to change a habit. And that is a completely random number pulled by one guy. Well, in 2009, researchers at the University of London did a long-term habit study, and they found it took anywhere from 18 to 254 days to change a habit, and the average was 66 days. Well, I don't like the number 66, so I threw in a bonus day, 67. And here's what's interesting, Teresa. It depends on the type of habit you're trying to change. So, for example, if you want to start drinking a glass of water before breakfast, that might take 18 days to form that habit. But if you want to quit smoking, that's going to take 254 days to change a habit. And here's why this is important. I want everybody to listen to this. Let's say you go on a diet, you follow it religiously for 21 days, but then you fall off the wagon on day 22. Well, you blame yourself, you're hard on yourself, and that's bogus. Research shows on average it takes 3 times longer, at least 3 times longer to form that habit. So the first number is 67. Now, the second number is even more important. So researchers were trying to figure out what are the habits of successful students around the world. So they went all around the world and they found one that just startled them. It was the number of minutes spent reading outside of school. They looked at the low students, the average students, and the high students. So the lower students, the kids in the 20th percentile, your F students, bottom of the class, they average less than a minute a day of reading outside of school. That didn't surprise anybody. It's probably why they're at the bottom of the class. But this did surprise researchers. The kids in the middle of the class, the 70th percentile, C students, average students, they average 9.6 minutes a day reading outside of school. And so when I'm doing a parent training, and by the way, when I do training, school districts will bring me in for 2 days. Day 1, I pump up the teachers. Day 2, I pump up the administrators. But on the night of day 1, I work with the parents because I think you need all 3 of those players in the same team. And that is how you move mountains together. So when I give that 9.6 minutes, all of a sudden the room gets real quiet at a parent training, and the first hand raises and a parent says, well, wait a second. Are you saying if I can get my kid to read 10 minutes a day at home, I can take him from an F to a C? That's exactly what I'm saying. There's a lot of research to support that, but that didn't blow away researchers like this number. The kids near the top of the class, the 90th percentile, your A- students, do they read 3 hours a day outside of school on average? No. Is it 1 hour a day? No. The average was just over 20 minutes a day.
Wow.
My entire program is for just over 2 months. Every day I'm showing 5 to 7 minute videos to parents at home, showing them a way to get their kids pumped up about reading, because the more excited you are to read, the more likely you are to read. The more you read, the better you get. So here's a simple tip I give parents. I'll have a lot of parents say, oh, I don't have enough money. I don't have anything to read at home. I'm like, oh, you do though, you do. President Bush Sr. about 30 years ago signed a very important law in this country that says every television set in America that's sold has to have closed captioning. So the first tip I always give parents is turn on the closed captioning on the TV. And parents will say, well, wait a sec. If the show's in English and the subtitles are in English, what good does that do? I'm like, well, that's a fair point. Let me make a point. Have you ever watched a show with subtitles and not looked at the subtitles? It's very difficult to do. Your brain is directed towards that text. And there's actually research to support this. When you look at reading scores around the world, the more kids watch TV, the lower their reading scores are in every single country except for one. The country with the top reading scores in the world watches the most TV in the world. It's Finland. And so people ask, well, how can that be? I'm like, well, because Finland makes really bad TV shows. And so what they do is they import Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island and Happy Days, and they have to subtitle them all the time. The kids are constantly reading. So that's a quick win for every parent out there. Turn on the closed captioning. So the two things that are also important for people to understand is we know that being read aloud to is just as good as reading on your own. So I always tell parents, well, read aloud to your kids. I mean, when I was teaching second grade, I had a little boy, Kiara, and Kiara's first grade teacher told me, Kiara don't know nothing. I'm like, well, thank you. Well, Kiara, who don't know nothing, came into my class one day. He said, hey, Miss Brassell, you see Barkley last night? He had 18 points, 16 boards. I'm like, thank you, Kiara. Because from that day forward, every day after lunch, I'd sit Kiara on my lap and we'd read the LA Times sports page together. And guess what, Teresa? By the end of the year, Kiara was one of my best readers. And I'll tell you right now, that kid read nothing but sports. But I tell this to people all the time, you know, you got to get them interested. The little boy who only reads Captain Underpants is going to become a better reader than the little boy who reads nothing. Captain Underpants is the gateway to Shakespeare, but you got to get the kid excited about it first. And then the other thing that we know in the research is your 20 minutes a day don't have to be consecutive. So like I'll tell parents, if let's say they're in Jacksonville, Florida, it takes them 10 minutes to drive to school and from school. I'm like, well, put in an audiobook. You just took care of your 20 minutes going back and forth to school every day. And parents are like, really? I'm like, yeah, there you go. Or you can do, you know, I have 3 children. When they were younger, when I was making their lunches while they were eating breakfast, I'd always open up my laptop. There's a great website brought to us free of charge by the Screen Actors Guild called storylineonline.net. And it has all kinds of famous celebrities reading aloud books. And every single one of those read alouds is closed caption. Each read aloud's about 15 minutes. It's, you know, that's taking care of 15 minutes while the kids are eating their breakfast. My own children in my house, I've had this rule. I wanted to establish a positive habit very early on. I have a feeling that television is here to stay. And rather than try to fight television, I try to embrace technology and figure out ways to use it to my advantage. And so my kids, they know that the price of admission to turn on the TV is they have to bring me something to read. And so when they were little, they'd bring me children's picture books. Now they're all teenagers. And so they'll either bring me, you know, a magazine article or more likely something on their iPad. Here's an article. Will you read it with me? And that's what we do. So again, I'm sorry, I have this habit, Teresa, long answers to short questions.
No, honestly, this is just such great information. I thank you for sharing it, because you've given parents some really valuable nuggets and some simple ways to infuse reading, to embed reading into their children's daily life. So thank you, because that would have been like where I was going to go next, because I always like to leave people with a way to do things. Let's help them, you know, let's take the guesswork, let's take the, you know, the complication out of things and just give them something simple that they can do. And you have done just that. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, and I also wanted to, before I forget, as a thank you to you and your audience for bearing with me, I want to give everybody a couple of gifts. So if you go to freegiftfromdanny.com, freegiftfromdanny.com, I'm going to give you a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to give everybody a complimentary e-copy of my book, Read, Lead, and Succeed, which is a book I wrote for a principal who was trying to keep his faculty positively engaged. So I said, okay, I'll write you a book. So every week I give you a concept, an inspirational quote, an inspirational short story, a book recommendation on a book you should read, but you're probably too lazy because you're an adult. So I also give you a children's picture book recommendation that demonstrates the same concept. You can read that in 5 minutes. And then last summer, I did a 5-day reading challenge online for about 700 parents, where every day for 5 consecutive days, I'm online for an hour giving answers to questions on ways to get kids excited about reading. It's basically a promo for my online reading program, but you'll also receive access to that. That's a thank you to you, Teresa, and to your audience.
Oh my goodness, that is a really big thank you. I appreciate it. Parents, please, 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 please go there. Just, you know, head over there right now. freereadingtraining.com. Go, 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 because reading is so valuable, and having children who enjoy reading is priceless. So please take them up on it.
Freegiftfromdanny.com. It'll be
free. Oh, sorry, free gift for, okay, you're okay. I'm sorry.
Freegiftfromdanny.com.
Okay, freegiftfromdanny.com. So please go there. Free gifts are always fun.
Yeah,
And
because one of the things I'm working on right now, Therese, is I met this guy during the pandemic. Diarmid Hudner runs this great company in Ireland called Cyber Smarties. And basically, Cyber Smarties is a social media platform for kids ages 6 to 12. Only kids are allowed. And so the police department and the school has to verify that it's a child. And so let's say I type a message to you, Teresa, I think you're ugly. Well, it won't let you send the message. Instead, you get a pop-up video of me saying there's better ways to talk to people than that. And after about 2 weeks, kids learn that they can't send negative things, so they only send positive messages. And basically the program has completely eliminated cyberbullying in Ireland. So now we have the program in India, it's in Ghana, it's in the UAE. We open up in September in Turkey for 9 million kids, because it's the same thing as what I'm doing. It's all about creating positive habits, and it's the little things that make the biggest difference. So how do we create positive habits in kids? It's a lot easier to create a positive habit in a child than it is in an adult.
absolutely. And honestly, I hate to say that's the reason I don't work with adults, because
Yeah,
I
sure.
felt like I was hitting my head against the wall trying
Yeah.
to teach an adult something so simple. And it wasn't so much that they couldn't learn it or didn't want to learn it, but the people around them. It's like, well, we're used to feeding him because it's so much easier, but he can feed himself because there's nothing wrong with his limbs. So let him. And even after I demonstrated that this 42-year-old man could feed himself, they still went back to feeding him. And I thought, oh goodness. Like, so I was just like, I give up. Let me go, let me work with the babies,
Yeah.
because then parents are more motivated and they're more likely to engage and implement the strategies. So yeah.
Yeah, and I've worked with, and this is for the teachers out there that like to blame parents on things. I'm like, I've worked with intoxicated parents, I've worked with incarcerated parents, but I have never once worked with a parent that doesn't love hearing me tell them something nice about their child. You know, so let's
Saying
focus on the
that,
positive. Yeah, let's focus on the positive.
yes, because they always lead with negative. And that's why, and I'm telling you, I've seen it. You'll call a parent and they won't answer their phone.
Mhm.
Or the child will say, my mom changed her number and does not want you to have it, because we focus on the negative. And out there, I mean, everybody knows the behaviors that you focus on are the behaviors that you get. So let's focus on the positive. I mean, parents, teachers, please focus on the positive. I remember this girl. I worked in a middle school with children with behavioral concerns. They call it the Pride program here in Florida, in Jacksonville. And so a colleague of mine and I were standing beside each other. And this girl walked up to me and literally yanked the hair from my head and then dropped it on the ground. And of course, she just thought it was so funny. So I said nothing. I just picked up my hair, put it in my pocket, and there were boys, around. It's like, oh my goodness, did you see what you missed? Are you okay? I mean, I would have done it again because it garnered sympathy from them, something I'd
Sure.
never seen from them before. Right.
Mhm.
So because they weren't given an opportunity to do that, to show that empathy. And we know how important empathy is.
Mhm.
And so anyway, the next day I went back to the school and I walked past that same young lady, and she came up to me and said, aren't you going to say hello to me? And I said, hello, beautiful. How are you today?
Mhm.
And that was the end of that. And what I want people to get out of this, I did not bring back, because we never want, who wants their negative to come back to, oh, well, you did this yesterday and da 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 da. No, like embrace the now, be here now, and give the child what they need now. And that was a turning point for our relationship. Because I chose not to hold that. So parents do the same thing. So please don't do that. Please stop.
You
Please.
should do a training for people on Twitter. I point this out to people. I'm like, you do have this option not to respond to hate.
Right.
You can just ignore them. Bullies love to get the attention. If you just
Yeah.
ignore the bully, they stop bullying.
Absolutely, because it takes two people to argue. It
It
takes two
sure
people,
does.
one person to respond to it, and all of that.
Yep.
So, Dr. Danny, I want to respect your time. So, do you want to share any last words with our audience before we sign off?
Well, I just really want to praise all the teachers out there and encourage them that you are making a difference every single day. And then for the parents out there, I want you to know that every kid is gifted. Um, you know, or Mrs. Turner, my mentor, she said, every one of my students is gifted. It just takes some of them a little longer to unwrap the presents.
I love it. I love it. But you know, once you open that, it's like opening a floodgate, right?
Absolutely.
So, oh my goodness, thank you. I'm going to borrow that.
You liberate. I never steal anything from another teacher. I liberate it and then expose my students to it.
Oh, love it. I like that term even better.
Yeah.
Liberate.
Everything is about words. Words matter. When I was an administrator, I got rid of faculty meetings and I replaced them with potlucks. People don't like faculty meetings. They like potlucks.
Yes. Wow. You are so creative.
Thanks for all you do, Teresa. And again, for your audience, if they go to freegiftfromdanny.com, you get a couple of goodies from me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danny. It's been an honor.
Thank you, Teresa. God bless. Thanks for all you do.
Bless you. Thank you, sir. And you too. Okay.